There is a type of man society rarely understands. He doesn't fit into the usual categories, neither the hopeless romantic searching for completion, nor the cold cynic who despises connection. He exists in the quiet middle where solitude isn't a wound or a rebellion, but a deliberate state of being. When people ask why he remains single, they expect the usual answers: fear of commitment, emotional unavailability, immaturity. They never imagine the truth is far more intricate, forged from experience, introspection, and an unshakable understanding of himself. For many of these men, the path toward lifelong solitude didn't begin with rejection. It began with observation. They watched the world around them carefully. They saw relationships built on convenience rather than devotion. They saw love used as leverage instead of a refuge. They saw people choosing partners to soothe loneliness instead of building something worthy. With each lesson, his standards did not simply rise, they matured. He realized he could not pretend to love for the sake of appearances, nor tie his life to someone out of fear of his own company. His solitude became a form of intellectual honesty. There is also a deeper layer, one rarely spoken aloud. Some men stay single because they have carried losses that reshaped their internal landscape. A heartbreak that didn't just end a relationship, but dismantled an identity. A betrayal that taught him how easily vulnerability can be weaponized. After enduring such collapse, he refused to rebuild himself merely to hand over the keys again. He learned to inhabit his own mind without apology, to become the architect and protector of his inner world. Once a man reaches that level of self-possession, he does not abandon it casually. But solitude is not always born from pain. For some men, it emerges from a sense of purpose that leaves no room for distraction. Their lives are defined by long-term visions, ambitions that stretch beyond the horizon of typical relationships. They understand the demands of mastery, whether of a craft, a discipline, or the self. They sense that attaching themselves prematurely would dilute the clarity that fuels their momentum. They are not avoiding intimacy, they are preserving their trajectory. They've seen too many men lose themselves trying to keep relationships alive, and they refuse to sacrifice the core of who they are for something that does not match that sacrifice. Another force shapes these solitary men: the collapse of traditional relationship roles. They grew up hearing that a man must be a provider, a protector, a stabilizing force. But as they entered adulthood, the rules were rewritten. Expectation multiplied, while acknowledgement dwindled. A man could give everything and still be told it wasn't enough. He could offer loyalty and be met with ambivalence. He could stand firm in his values and still be criticized for them. Eventually, he recognized that love, in its modern form, often required a self-erasure he was not willing to perform. So he stepped back, not from affection, but from the uneven terrain that made giving feel indistinguishable from losing. But the most intriguing psychological trait of the lifelong single man is his relationship with peace. There comes a point where solitude stops feeling like an empty room and begins to feel like a sovereign territory. His routines become rituals. His silence becomes nourishment. His autonomy becomes sacred. Once a man reaches that state, companionship must add to his life, not consume it. He won't entertain chaos disguised as passion or entitlement masquerading as intimacy. He refuses to negotiate with anyone who demands access to him without offering depth in return. This doesn't make him difficult, it makes him discerning. There is also the man who has seen behind the illusions. He understands the subtle power games in dating, the testing, the emotional politics, the unspoken strategies. None of it interests him. He doesn't want to decode mixed messages or navigate shifting expectations. He prefers conversations that don't feel like negotiations and connections that don't need deciphering. He's not detached from emotion. He simply refuses to treat love like a psychological chess match. When he senses manipulation or performative affection, he withdraws instantly, not out of fear, but out of principle. And then there is the rarest reason of all. Some men simply like who they are when they're alone. They do not crave external validation to stabilize their identity. They do not chase intimacy to feel worthy. Their solitude does not echo, it resonates. They understand their mind intimately, their habits, their ambitions, their shadows. Their life becomes a quiet masterpiece, built slowly, intentionally, without compromise. They are not missing anything. They are not escaping anything. They are living in alignment with a truth most people are too afraid to admit. Companionship is meaningful only when both lives are already whole. These men aren't anti-love. They aren't bitter. They aren't broken. They are simply unwilling to exchange their peace for uncertainty, their clarity for confusion, or their purpose for a connection that does not reflect the depth they carry within them. They know that loneliness is not the absence of people, it is the absence of understanding. And until they meet someone who understands the architecture of their soul, rather than just the outline of their life, they are content remaining sovereign. Because for them, staying single is not an act of resignation. It is a psychological evolution, a deliberate, disciplined, deeply conscious choice, a recognition that solitude is not something to escape from, but something to master.